you're not the only one that navigates a very dangerous waters. I mean, being in your position is almost like being an executive director of a nonprofit. You could be fired, and the decision makers change often, or maybe flow, and you can be fired on a whim of someone who wasn't in the conversation at the beginning, came along later, didn't understand where you're going, and is not clued in. But I think one of the things that's enlightened about the way that you're approaching this is you have a framework that you've identified and codified called SHIFT. So I think that affords you or brings you authority. It brings you respect. It shows that you have a process, and it takes you a lot of just you and what your whims are that day out of the conversation when you're focusing on a process with steps.
You're bringing up an interesting thing about that, what I call the difference between art and science, as the two different extremes of one continuum of what this work is. And I almost prefer to think of myself more as an artist, of that I do this very intuitively, and I flying by the seat of my pants, and I'm not sure I could train someone to do it. But the difficulty with that is, it's very hard to define what the deliverable is. When I meet with a family, like my deliverable is that on Christmas Day, when Uncle Bob pulls up to Grandpa's house, if he sees Aunt Sue's car in the driveway and says, you know what, let's come back a bit later because I don't want to, that's what I'm trying to deliver, family harmony. Now, how do you put a deliverable on that? That's the difficult part. There are more and more now structured ways that people are coming up with to sort of say this is what you need to do, but it can be a little bit dangerous. There's a whole area of what people call a family constitution that sounds like a really sexy thing for a multi-generation family to have. And so some consulting firms have decided that, if family businesses want a constitution, we'll sell them a family constitution, and they'll hire people to write up this big document, and they do it, and they have the consultants and the professionals do it, and the family has very little input, and you can guess what the value of that document to the family will be afterwards if they've had no input into it. It's zero or less, right? It's like, yeah, but I never signed that BS, that piece of paper. Right? So yes, family constitution makes sense for a family that's been in business for a few generations, and they need to sort of, codify all their guidelines of how they've agreed to work together. But any family who says, oh, let's start with a constitution, my God, no. I just wrote a blog recently that talked about a family's declaration of interdependence. So the family needs to come together and declare that they are interdependent and that they want to work together. And then how many years between the Declaration of Independence in the US, 1776, the Constitution wasn't until more than 10 years later. So yeah, you can have a constitution, but that's not where you start. You start with figuring out how you're going to work together, and start to figure out your family governance, which is a kind of an ugly word that people don't like, the word governance. I've learned to start to like it, but I've kind of defined it in ways that are easier to grasp, about how you make decisions together and how you communicate together.
Hey, thanks for watching these golden nuggets. And as a reward, I got another big fat golden nugget just for you. I wrote this book for you to help you get your act together online so you can grow your business better. You're searching, you want to learn. This is a great book. Grab the book, grow your business.
Amazing, right?